You really said that? That I was the sedan and she was the Bugatti? Chloe Thompson hadn't meant to speak aloud. The words slipped out, ripped from a wound she thought had already scarred. Across the Met Gala ballroom, her ex-husband laughed, champagne glass raised, his new fiancée glittering on his arm like an award he'd just won. "When you find your real happily ever after," Daniel drawled loudly, "you don't look back at your mistakes." Heads turned, some in pity, some in amusement. Chloe's cheeks burned. 6 years of marriage reduced to a punchline. She had no idea the universe was already sharpening its knife. Chloe stared at him across the ballroom, the words still echoing, ugly and sharp. Mistake. He'd called their marriage a mistake. Daniel Hartman stood in a circle of admirers near the silent auction, handsome in a black tuxedo that fit like it had been sewn directly onto his ego. His fiancée, Cassandra Vale, clung to his arm in a column of silver sequins, diamonds at her throat catching the chandelier light like shards of ice. "It's fine," Chloe whispered. "I'm fine." Beside her, Olivia Chen didn't buy it for a second. "You are absolutely not fine," her best friend muttered, fingers tightening around Chloe's hand. "He just compared you to a used sedan, in public, at a charity gala." Chloe tried to laugh. It came out thin and cracked. "At least I'm reliable," she said. Across the room, Daniel leaned closer to his audience, voice carrying. "When you find the right person, everything just clicks into place," he said. "It's like I was driving a dependable little car, and now—" He squeezed Cassandra's waist. "I'm behind the wheel of a Bugatti, entirely different stratosphere of happiness." Someone snorted. Another guest laughed too loud. Cassandra's smile twitched, like even she could hear how cruel the metaphor was. Daniel followed their gaze, his eyes finding Chloe's. For half a heartbeat, his expression changed, something like annoyance or embarrassment. Then he smirked, lifted his glass in a mocking salute. He wanted her to hear, wanted her to see just how thoroughly he'd upgraded. The champagne in Chloe's hand turned to acid. The room blurred at the edges, opulent gold and marble smearing into dull color. She could feel people watching, curious eyes flicking between ex-wife and new fiancé, like this was some kind of live drama. "Let's go," Olivia whispered. "We don't owe this room a single second more of your dignity." Chloe's instinct was to bolt, to disappear the way she'd learned to after the divorce. But something in her, something small and stubborn, refused to run with her back turned. "I'm not staying for him," she said softly. "I came for the art, for the cause, for you." "Okay," Olivia said carefully. "Then we stand tall, take a breath, and remember that his opinion of you is the least interesting thing about your life." That helped. A little. They drifted toward a quieter corner, away from the main clump of socialites. A painting of a storm-tossed sea loomed beside them, all dark waves and distant lightning. Chloe stared at it, trying to slow her breathing, focusing on brushstrokes instead of the words still echoing in her head. Sedan, Bugatti, mistake. They hadn't always been like this, she reminded herself. There had been nights when Daniel fell asleep with his head in her lap, exhausted from building his investment firm, mumbling, "Couldn't do this without you, Chloe." There had been mornings when they'd shared burnt toast over the sink because the coffee machine exploded, and they'd laughed until their sides hurt. Those moments were real. They had to be. But standing here tonight, listening to him erase 6 years as if they'd been a clerical error, she realized something brutal. Whatever tenderness they'd had was gone. Not buried, not lost. Deliberately shredded and thrown away. After the gala, she climbed the stairs to her Brooklyn walk-up on shaking legs. Her small apartment greeted her with the smell of Earl Grey and old paper. Bookshelves lined the walls, spines worn and familiar. A second-hand couch. The soft, insistent snore of Barnaby, her rescued beagle, from his bed in the corner. She exhaled, the breath trembling out of her like it had been held hostage all evening. Here, she wasn't the sedan. She was just Chloe, librarian, dog mom, lover of obscure 19th-century poets and Saturday morning farmers' markets. She slipped out of the emerald gown, hung it carefully, pulled on an oversized sweater and thick socks. The city glowed through her window, soft and distant. Her phone buzzed. "Olivia, proud of you." He was trash before the Bugatti line. That just confirmed it. Chloe smiled faintly, thumbs hovering over the keyboard. Before she could reply, another notification popped up, an article from a financial news app she almost never opened anymore. Reclusive tech titan Sebastian Sterling rumored to be updating will. She snorted. Billionaires and their empires. Entirely different universe. She tossed the phone onto the couch, steeped a cup of tea, and curled up with Barnaby. Outside, New York blazed neon. Inside, her world was small, quiet, carefully tended. She had survived the divorce. She had built this peace with her own 2 hands. And as she finally drifted towards sleep, she told herself, firmly, that Daniel Hartman, his Bugatti metaphors, and his diamond-dripping fiancée were just background noise in a life that no longer belonged to him. She had no idea that by the 3rd Tuesday in November, the entire world would know her name, and Daniel would be the one choking on dust. The 3rd Tuesday in November started like any other grey New York morning. Chloe's alarm chimed softly at 6:30 a.m. Barnaby groaned and buried his nose deeper into his blanket. She shuffled to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and watched thin rain streak the window. At the New York Public Library's archival department, the world always felt a little removed. Down in the cool, hushed stacks, time slowed. She was cataloguing a collection of handwritten letters from a Gilded Age suffragist, the paper fragile under her gloved fingers, the ink faded but fierce. Here, people weren't mistakes. They were voices, preserved. Her phone was on silent in her bag. She liked it that way. The outside world could wait. Across town, the outside world was anything but quiet. On the 80th floor of a glass tower in Midtown, a conference room vibrated with tension. Cameras, reporters, legal pads. The logo of Sterling, Hart and Finch, one of the most powerful law firms in the world, glowed discreetly on the wall. Sebastian Sterling loomed over the financial world like a modern myth. Founder of Innovis Prime, a tech empire that had redefined entire industries. He hadn't been photographed in 2 decades. Rumors said he lived like a ghost somewhere in upstate New York, seeing only lawyers, doctors, and the occasional unlucky CEO. Today, his lawyers had called an urgent, unprecedented announcement. Speculation churned. Was he stepping down, selling, naming a successor? At precisely 11:00 a.m., Amelia Hart stepped to the podium. Severe platinum bob, black suit, sharp enough to cut. The room fell silent. "Good morning," she said, voice crisp. "On behalf of our client, Mr. Sebastian Sterling, we are here to announce a change to his personal estate and testament." Pens stilled. Phones hovered, recording. "Mr. Sterling has chosen, for reasons that are his own, to make one element public at this time," Amelia continued. "Effective immediately, 100% of his personal fortune, controlling interest in Innovis Prime, and all associated global assets, currently valued at approximately $78 billion, will be bequeathed to a single individual." Gasps. A low murmur rippled like wind through tall grass. $78 billion, someone whispered. Who is it? His son? A secret wife? Amelia adjusted her glasses. "This individual is not a family member," she said, "nor a business associate. She is a private citizen of New York." She paused, for effect, or because even she understood the gravity of the next sentence. "Mr. Sterling's designated and sole heir is Miss Chloe Ann Thompson of Brooklyn." For a heartbeat, the room was a frozen photograph. Then chaos. "Who? Spell that?" Is she on the board? Phones came alive, fingers flying over screens. Search engines spat back nothing helpful. A librarian profile on the NYPL staff page, an old college yearbook photo, a blurry tag from someone's book club 7 years ago. No socialite, no CEO, just a woman who loved books. On the 32nd floor of a very different building, Daniel Hartman was in his element. He stood at the head of a gleaming conference table at Hartman Capital, jacket off, sleeves rolled, charming a roomful of potential investors with the ease of a man who had built his life on performance. Graphs glowed behind him, green lines arcing up. Our fund is uniquely positioned, he said smoothly. We're not just predicting the market, we're shaping it. His phone buzzed on the table, then again, then again. At first he ignored it. Investors came first, money came first. Then his CFO's phone buzzed, his junior analysts. One by one, screens lit up like a string of alarmed little stars. Is the building on fire? Daniel joked lightly, trying to keep the rhythm of his pitch. Laughter around the table was thinner than he liked. Finally, one of the younger analysts, Henderson, cleared his throat. His face was pale. Mr. Hartman, I'm sorry, but you need to see this. Daniel's annoyance flared. He snatched the phone from the man's hand. The screen displayed a breaking news alert from the Wall Street Journal. Reclusive tech tycoon, Sebastian Sterling names obscure Brooklyn librarian sole heir to $78 billion fortune. Below the headline, a photo, not a polished headshot, not a paparazzi snap. A simple staff photo from the New York Public Library website. Brown hair, thoughtful eyes, a hint of a smile that never quite reached them. Chloe. The room tilted, the letters on the screen blurred. For a second he was sure this was some elaborate prank, a deepfake. Another notification slid across the top. Richest woman in America. Who is the ex-wife behind the fortune? Ex-wife. His investors stared. Someone coughed. Is everything all right, Daniel? One of them asked carefully. He forced a laugh that felt like broken glass in his throat. Just surprising news, he said. Shall we take a short break? Across town, in a sunlit penthouse Cassandra now considered hers as much as Daniel's, she lounged on the couch, scrolling through wedding venues on her tablet. Her world was filtered through rose gold. Designer dress fittings, exclusive caterers, destination honeymoons. A notification popped up from a popular society blog. Scandal of the year. Whose boring ex-wife just became the richest woman in America? Intrigued, Cassandra tapped. She skimmed, then slowed. Her heart stuttered at the line. Her ex-husband, rising finance star Daniel Hartman, was overheard just weeks ago comparing her to a reliable sedan and his new fiancée to a Bugatti. Her own name glowed beside the word Bugatti. Then she saw it. The number, 78,000, and the name, Chloe Thompson, Daniel's ex-wife. The walls of the penthouse, the art, the tasteful furniture, the view, suddenly felt flimsy, like a stage set. The diamond on her finger felt heavy and hollow. Back in the quiet corners of the library archive, Chloe carefully slid another letter into its mylar sleeve. The hum of the preservation machine, the soft rustle of paper, the muted footsteps of colleagues. This was her world, gentle, predictable. Her phone lay silent in her bag, logo pulsing occasionally with each missed call. It wasn't until she clocked out at 5 p.m., pulled on her coat, and dug for her keys that she saw it. 147 missed calls, 307 text messages. The first 40 were from Olivia. Call me now. Pick up. Not a drill. Turn on literally any news channel. Heart thudding, Chloe dialed. Where are you? Olivia shrieked the second she picked up. Are you safe? Yes. I'm at the library. Liv, what's happening? There was a sound like hysterical laughter and sobbing colliding. Sebastian Sterling named you his heir, Chloe. All of it. The money, the company, $78 billion. You're on CNN. You're everywhere. Chloe laughed. She couldn't help it. Did you start happy hour at lunch? I am stone sober, Olivia snapped. A very expensive lawyer just said your full name into 1,000 microphones. People are outside your building. You need security. Are you listening to me? Something in Olivia's voice, sharp, terrified, utterly serious, cut through the haze. Chloe's knees wobbled. She sank onto a bench. The lobby buzzed faintly in the distance. This is ridiculous, she whispered. I don't know him. I've never met... Miss Thompson. She looked up. The library's director stood there, ashen. Beside him were two men in dark suits, earbuds curled discreetly around their ears. I'm David Chen, the taller one said, showing an ID. Head of security for Sterling Enterprises. We need to get you out of here, now. Out of... why? He nodded toward the front doors. Outside, beyond the glass, a crowd had formed. Cameras, microphones, shouted questions muffled by stone walls. Because, David said calmly, your life just became very, very public. As he guided her through a side exit, reporters spotted them. Ms. Thompson. Did you know Mr. Sterling? Is it true your ex-husband called you a mistake? The door of the black SUV thudded shut, cutting off the noise. The city blurred past the tinted glass. Chloe fumbled for her phone with shaking hands. Social media feeds flooded the screen. Headlines, photos, think pieces. Then, at the top of her messages, above Olivia's frantic string of texts, sat a notification from a number she'd blocked but never deleted. Daniel Hartman. 3 words. We need to talk. Chloe stared at the message, the white cursor blinking over his name. Outside, New York's skyline rose and fell like a jagged heartbeat. For the first time since the divorce, she realized Daniel was about to need her more than she had ever needed him, and that was a kind of power she'd never expected to hold. The penthouse wasn't a home, it was a kingdom suspended in glass. When the elevator doors opened directly into the living room, Chloe's breath caught. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Central Park from 3 directions, a living painting of bare trees and winding paths dusted with November grey. This is his? She asked, hardly recognizing her own voice. Was, Amelia Hart corrected, gliding in behind her. Up close, the lawyer was even sharper than on television, dark eyes that missed nothing, posture straight as a verdict. It's yours now, Miss Thompson. The words didn't land. They floated somewhere above Chloe, as unreal as a line of dialogue from a movie she'd wandered into halfway through. Staff appeared, housekeepers, a private chef, a man introduced as her personal assistant. Security details were outlined, phones handed over. She signed documents with trembling fingers, while Amelia explained in clipped, efficient phrases what $78 billion actually meant. It's not just liquid assets, Amelia said, tapping a thick folder. You hold controlling interest in Innovis Prime. That includes research facilities, patents, several tech subsidiaries. There's also extensive real estate, art holdings, and the Sterling Foundation. The Foundation? One of the largest philanthropic entities in the world. Education, climate initiatives, medical research. Mr. Sterling was very clear that you have full autonomy, but he recommended that you take time to acclimate before making major changes. I don't understand. Chloe stared at the folder. He doesn't know me. I don't know him. For the first time, something like hesitation flickered in Amelia's gaze. Mr. Sterling was private, she said. His reasons were his own. He did leave a personal letter for you. It is to be delivered when you ask for it. Chloe blinked. Why not just give it to me? His words, not mine. Amelia closed the folder. For now, I suggest you rest. The media will be relentless. We'll handle them. Your job is to breathe. Breathe. Right. That night, alone in a bedroom bigger than her entire apartment, Chloe lay awake under linen sheets that smelled like nothing at all. No faint hint of laundry detergent, no trace of her own life, just cold, clean air. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She'd insisted on keeping it over Amelia's mild protests. Olivia. I've already told 3 reporters you refuse to answer questions until you've had at least 8 hours of sleep and a sandwich. Chloe smiled weakly. Then she scrolled down. Daniel's text sat there, stark. We need to talk. She should block him. She'd muted his name on every platform months ago after the Bugatti post. She'd trained herself not to check his feeds, not to look at photos of Cassandra's designer vacations or his smug captions. This was supposed to be the quiet part of her life, but now articles were popping up everywhere pairing his name with hers, dredging up their history. From sedan to tycoon, the ex-wife he mocked is now richer than him 10 times over. The petty part of her, the part still stinging from the gala, felt a vicious, shameful thrill at the headlines. Let him squirm. Her thumb hovered over the block button. She imagined his face when he'd read the news, imagined the investors in his conference room, the questions, the scramble. He deserves this, she thought. But another memory crept in. The night his father had died. The way he'd sobbed into her shoulder until his whole body shook, repeating, "There's never enough time, Chloe, there's never enough." She'd loved him once. That had been real too. Curiosity won. "What do you want, Daniel?" she typed. Deleted it. Tough week. Deleted that too. Finally she wrote, "I'm safe. There's nothing to talk about." She didn't send it. Instead, she set the phone face down and stared at the ceiling. The next morning, the world showed no sign of calming down. Drones captured aerial shots of the building. Talk shows debated whether it was right for so much wealth to go to a random librarian. Old high school acquaintances she barely remembered slid into her DMs with heart emojis and faux intimate messages. Chloe moved through the days like a ghost haunting someone else's life. She met with financial advisors who spoke in percentages and projections. She sat through briefings about Innovis Prime's current trials. She listened, nodded, took notes she wasn't sure she'd ever fully understand, but when everyone left, when the penthouse fell silent again, she wandered. A Monet on one wall, a Rothko on another. Shelves of first editions that should have thrilled the librarian in her, but now just looked like artifacts in a museum where she wasn't sure she belonged. On the 3rd evening, David stepped into her path as she headed for the elevator. "There's a man downstairs," he said. "He claims to be your ex-husband. He's been waiting in the lobby for an hour." Chloe's stomach dropped. "You didn't let him up, did you?" "Of course not." David's tone held a faint edge of offense. "But he's persistent. The press is starting to notice." She pictured Daniel downstairs, tie loosened, charm turned to desperation. The story had already begun to spin. Ex-husband shows up at billionaire ex-wife's door. Olivia would tell her to leave him there, to let him sweat, let security escort him out. That would be the clean choice, the smart choice. But closure had always eluded her. Their marriage had ended not with a blowout fight, but with a slow erosion of kindness. 1,000 small slights that culminated in a signed paper and a quiet walk away. She'd never said what she truly wanted to say. "Send him up," Chloe said. David's brows lifted slightly. "Are you sure?" "I want this on my terms," she replied, surprised at the steadiness of her own voice. "No cameras, no reporters, just one conversation. After that, he doesn't get through my door again." David studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I'll have 2 agents outside the room. If you feel uncomfortable at any point, say the word archive. We'll step in." The elevator dinged minutes later. Chloe waited in the living room, heart pounding, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles hurt. The city glowed behind her like a backdrop. The doors slid open. Daniel stepped into the penthouse, and for the first time since the gala, she looked at him without flinching. He wasn't on a stage now. No admiring crowd, no fiancé. Just a man who'd thrown away a good thing, staring at the life he'd never imagined she'd have. "Wow," he said finally, eyes sweeping the room. "You upgraded." The word hung between them. His word, snapped in half and handed back. Chloe felt something inside her go very, very still. This meeting, she realized, was the last mistake of the old Chloe, the one who needed his explanations, his apologies, his acknowledgement. She had no idea it would also hand her the weapon she needed for his downfall. Up close, Daniel looked tired, not in the rugged, I-work-hard way he'd once carried like a badge, but in a frayed-at-the-edges way. Fine lines at the corners of his eyes, a tightness around his mouth she'd never seen before. "Congratulations," he said, gesturing to the view. "You always did like libraries with good natural light. This is the most expensive reading room in the world." Chloe didn't smile. "Why are you here, Daniel?" He paced a few steps, shoving his hands into his pockets. The same restless energy that had always made him seem larger than life now made him look like a boy caught doing something wrong. "I saw the news," he said. "Obviously, everyone did. He exhaled. "I needed to make sure you're okay." "Did you?" she asked quietly. "Because the last time I saw you, you were telling a room full of strangers that losing me was like trading in a used car." He winced. "You heard that." "I heard every word." The silence after her sentence rang louder than any shout. Daniel scrubbed a hand over his face. "Chloe, that was stupid. Performative. I was trying to impress people who don't matter. I've been kicking myself for it ever since." She raised a brow. "Kicking yourself because it was cruel, or because now it makes an excellent headline?" His jaw clenched. "Both," he admitted. And for a second she saw a flicker of the man she'd once believed in, the one who could tell the truth when cornered. "I made mistakes with you," he said. "Big ones. I know that. I was arrogant, obsessed with the next deal, the next step up. I thought you'd always be there in that little apartment waiting, no matter how much I neglected us." He took a cautious step closer. "But when I saw you on the news..." His gaze searched her face. "I remembered what it felt like when we were a team, before the money, before the firm." Chloe's heart thudded, painfully familiar rhythm. "Daniel!" He seized on the opening. "We were good together," he said softly. "At least at the start. You grounded me. You reminded me of what mattered. Maybe this..." He gestured vaguely around them. "Is the universe telling us we got it wrong, that we're supposed to find our way back? Back to late nights alone while he networked. Back to quiet erosion. Back to being the sedan parked neatly in the garage while he chased faster rides." "You're engaged," she said. "To Cassandra." Something flickered in his eyes. "It's complicated." She almost laughed. "It's really not." Before he could reply, a discreet knock sounded at the door. David stepped in, eyes flicking between them. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but Ms. Thompson has received an urgent piece of mail. We thought you might want to see it immediately." Chloe's brow furrowed. "Mail?" David held out a cream-colored envelope, thick and expensive, her name written on the front in elegant script. She recognized the handwriting instantly, even though she'd never seen it before. It was the kind of script that had never touched a grocery list. Cassandra Vale. "Who's that from?" Daniel asked, frowning. Chloe turned the envelope over. The seal had already been checked by security, slit cleanly. "I'll read it later," she said. "You should read it now," David said quietly. His tone told her everything. This wasn't a bouquet or a hate note from a stranger. This mattered. "Fine." Chloe slid the letter free. A faint perfume rose, something cool and expensive. She began to read. Dear Ms. Thompson, you don't know me, but I know far too much about you. My name is Cassandra Vale. Until 3 days ago, I was engaged to Daniel Hartman. Chloe glanced up. Daniel's face had gone very still. She continued, I'm writing for one reason, to warn you. When I learned about your inheritance, I felt many things, shock, envy, humiliation. But above all, I felt a clarity I wish I'd had months ago. I saw who Daniel really is. I saw what he intends to do. Chloe's stomach turned. I went through his phone. I know that's a violation in its own way, and perhaps I deserve some karmic embarrassment for it. But what I found was worse. He has been searching. How to annul an engagement in New York. Can an ex-husband contest a will? Reconnecting with an ex after a breakup. Daniel swore under his breath. He doesn't want to make amends. He wants a payout. He sees your fortune as something that should have been his, and he will weaponize your shared history to get it. Chloe's pulse pounded in her ears. I ended our engagement. I told him I refused to be with a man who only learns the value of a woman once she comes with a price tag. I don't know if this letter will change anything for you. You know him better than I do, but I felt you deserved the truth from someone who has also been cast as an upgrade. He will lie. He will tell you everything you once needed to hear. Please don't let him rewrite your story to fit his greed. He does not deserve a second chance, and you deserve far more than being anyone's consolation prize. Sincerely, Cassandra Vale. The room was very quiet when she finished. Daniel's face had flushed an ugly, mottled red. She's lying, he said immediately. She's furious. She's trying to turn you against me. Did you search those things? Chloe asked softly. His mouth opened, closed. I was curious, he said finally. You come into 78 billion out of nowhere. Anyone would wonder what's possible. It doesn't mean... It means, she interrupted, voice steady, that the first thing you did when you realized I'd become valuable was try to figure out how to stake a claim. He flinched as if she'd slapped him. You don't understand how this world works, he said. It's complicated. There are opportunities. If we work together, you could protect yourself. There are sharks circling you already, Chloe. I'm offering you a life raft. For the first time she laughed. It wasn't kind. You are the shark, she said, and you think I'm the chum. Daniel stepped closer, desperation cracking his facade. I'm the only one who knows you, he insisted, really knows you. These people, he gestured toward the door, the city, the world, they'll eat you alive. Sebastian Sterling didn't pick you because of who you are. You were random, a symbol, a headline. Let me help you turn this into something real. Something inside Chloe finally snapped. Get out, she said. Chloe! I said, get out. Her voice was calm, but the air around it felt like the split second before thunder. Daniel stared at her, at the woman who'd once cried quietly in their shared bathroom rather than pick a fight. He realized too late that this version of her, this woman in bare feet on a billionaire's marble floor, letter trembling in her hand, was not someone he knew how to manipulate anymore. It's not over, he said, straightening his jacket as if he were leaving a meeting, not a life. You'll see. You'll need someone who understands money, strategy, leverage. When that happens, you'll call. No, Chloe said. I won't. David opened the door. Daniel walked out, shoulders stiff. Chloe stood alone in the echo he left behind. For the first time since the announcement, anger burned hotter than fear. Not just at Daniel, at herself for inviting him up, for giving him an audience. She looked down at Cassandra's letter again, at the careful, looping script. Two women, both turned into metaphors in Daniel's story, had finally compared notes. Enough. If she was going to survive this, she couldn't keep being a passenger in her own life, carried along by other people's decisions. She went to find Amelia. When the lawyer appeared in the living room, Chloe held the letter to her chest like a shield. You told me Sebastian left a letter, she said. A personal one. Yes, I want it. Amelia studied her as if weighing something. He said you would ask when you were ready, she murmured. He also said the answer might change everything you thought you knew about your own worth. Chloe swallowed. My worth has been up for debate my entire life. I think I can handle one more opinion. Amelia nodded slowly. Very well. She left the room and returned with a plain, unmarked envelope. No monogram, no flourish. Just weight. She placed it in Chloe's hands. Whatever is in there, Amelia said, is yours alone. But I will say this. Mr. Sterling did nothing by accident. Chloe traced her name on the front, written in a firm, unfamiliar hand. For years her story had been written by other people. Daniel, gossip sites, strangers on social media. It was time, finally, to read the version written by the man who had changed everything with one line in a will. She slit the envelope open with a trembling finger, not yet knowing that inside lay not just answers about the past, but the blueprint for the cleverest revenge she'd ever deliver. The letter began without greeting. No dear Ms. Thompson. No formalities. I imagine you're furious with me. Chloe snorted. Fair. You did not ask for this, and yet I have dragged you onto a stage you never wanted to stand on. Let me start by telling you that you were not random. I did not spin a globe and jab my finger. You met me once. You will not remember it. That is why I chose you. She frowned, reading on. 5 years ago, I sat at a back table in the main branch of the New York Public Library. I was an old man in a rumpled coat, indistinguishable from a dozen others. To the world, I was still Sebastian Sterling, but that day I was just a widower who'd lost the only person who ever looked at me and saw more than a balance sheet. The words tightened her throat. I was angry. At markets, at governments, at God, if he exists. Mostly at humanity. I had spent decades watching people contort themselves for a fragment of my attention. I decided, in a moment of pettiness, to conduct an experiment. Of course he had, she thought. I dropped my wallet near the reference desk. Not the expensive leather one my assistants see, but an old, cracked thing with cash and cards and an ID with my middle name. No Sterling. Person after person stepped over it. Some saw it and looked away. One man picked it up, pocketed it, and walked out. Chloe's jaw tightened. Then you walked by. Her heart stuttered. You noticed it. You looked around, trying to see who might have dropped it. You didn't check how much cash was inside. You didn't hide what you were doing. You took it to the desk and said, and I quote, "Someone must be having the worst day. I hope they get this back before it gets worse." She remembered it now, faintly. A flicker of a day when her own checking account had been low, when an extra $100 might have meant breathing room. She hadn't even opened the wallet. I watched you. You went back to your cart of books. A colleague asked why you didn't keep it. You said, "Because it's not mine, and I have enough." Chloe's eyes burned. Enough. At the time she'd meant her tea, her books, her dog waiting at home, even the then fragile remains of her marriage. She'd had enough because she didn't know yet what it felt like to be told she wasn't. I had my proof. In a world where everyone wanted more, you were content with enough. That made you dangerous and invaluable. She let out a shaky laugh. Dangerous. Right. I followed you discreetly. That sounds sinister. Perhaps it is. But I have never been a man who trusts second-hand reports. I watched you pour your life into small things, into preserving words others had forgotten, into a dog that limped, into a friend crying on your couch over her own broken heart. I also watched your husband discard you. Her fingers tightened on the page. Yes, I saw the Bugatti metaphor. The video made the rounds in circles you will never see. It amused people who have lost their souls. It enraged me. She blinked. She hadn't realized anyone beyond that ballroom had heard it. Money amplifies what is already there. It turns arrogance into cruelty, insecurity into greed. I have watched too many Daniels contort my companies, my foundation, and even my governments to serve themselves. Chloe swallowed. I do not need another clever man who can turn 1 billion into 10. I have met hundreds. I need someone who will look at a wallet on the ground and say, I have enough. That is why it is you. Not because you were my secret daughter, or lover, or protégé. Because in a moment when no one was watching, you chose decency over opportunity. Tears blurred the ink. All those years Daniel had implied she wasn't ambitious enough, that she didn't want more the way he did, that she was content with little things because she was afraid of big ones. And here was one of the richest men alive saying that exact trait was why he'd trusted her with his empire. You will be hunted now. They will come smiling, holding contracts and flowers. Some will be obvious. Some will wear the faces of people you once trusted. I cannot fight them for you. I will likely be gone by the time you read this, but I can arm you with knowledge. Attached to the letter was a second sheet. Names, companies, even a few politicians, each annotated with a short, brutally honest sentence. One name leaped out at her, Hartman Capital. Watch your ex-husband. Men like him do not see people, they see assets. Chloe exhaled, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh. If you only knew, she whispered. At the end of the letter, Sebastian's tone shifted from clinical to almost gentle. You will make mistakes, that is acceptable. You will doubt yourself, that is human. But every time you are presented with a choice, ask yourself, what would I do if no one was watching? If there were no headlines, no investors, no ex-husband taking notes? Then do that. There is no greater rebellion against a greedy world than quiet integrity with loud consequences. Quiet integrity, loud consequences. She folded the letter carefully as if it might crumble. When she walked into Amelia's office moments later, her eyes were still red, but something had shifted in her posture. I want a meeting with the Innovis Prime Board, she said. Soon. I want to understand what I actually control. Amelia's brows rose. We can arrange that. There is also something you should know. Hartman Capital has been aggressively bidding for a data contract with Innovis Prime for months. The board was considering it before Mr. Sterling's passing. Of course. Daniel had been circling Sebastian's world long before Chloe inherited it. Schedule the meeting, Chloe said. Don't tell them what I know. Let them think I'm just the quiet librarian from Brooklyn. Olivia would call it that tone, the one Chloe used when returning a book that was 6 months overdue without raising her voice, but still managing to make a grown man squirm. A week later, Chloe stepped out of a private elevator into a different boardroom. Polished wood, panoramic views, a dozen powerful people around a table. She wore a tailored navy dress Amelia had insisted on, but she'd kept her scuffed leather satchel instead of a designer bag. A small rebellion. Ms. Thompson, the chairman said, standing, we're honored. Thank you for seeing me, she replied. I'm still learning, but I do understand one thing. You work for the shareholders. That's me now, apparently. A few polite chuckles. They ran through charts, projections, upcoming product launches. Chloe listened, asked questions that made a few executives blink. She might not speak their language fluently, but she knew how to research. Then, halfway through the agenda, the chairman cleared his throat. Next item, discussion of Hartman Capital's proposal for the data integration pilot. Her pulse kicked. There's been a request, he said, from Mr. Hartman himself, to present his case directly to the board. Given your connection, we wanted to check with you first. Chloe thought of Sebastian's letter, of the word asset. Let him present, she said. The chairman nodded, relief flickering across his features. Very well, he's waiting outside. The door opened. Daniel walked in, polished and practiced in a charcoal suit, presentation binder in hand. His confidence faltered for a fraction of a second when he saw her at the head of the table. "Miss Thompson," he said smoothly, masking the shock. "Always nice to see a familiar face." Around the table, glances bounced between them like ping-pong balls. Chloe folded her hands. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hartman," she said. "You have the floor." If he wanted to play in boardrooms, she would meet him there. This time she wouldn't be the one reduced to a metaphor. Daniel slipped into his salesman's skin like a second suit. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said, eyeing the board as if Chloe were just another chair. Hartman Capital is uniquely positioned to leverage Innovis Prime's data assets for maximum return while mitigating risk through diversified. He talked fast. Numbers, acronyms, graphs flickered to life on the screen behind him, rising lines, exploding pie charts, a visual symphony of profit. Chloe watched in silence, noting when he glossed over risk factors, when he used vague phrases like market correction instead of possible crash. This was the language he'd always spoken fluently, the one that had left her feeling small and simple by comparison. Not today. When he finished, a murmur of impressed approval ran around the table. One board member, a silver-haired man with wire-rimmed glasses, nodded. "Impressive," he said. "Your track record is certainly strong, Mr. Hartman." "Thank you," Daniel said, cutting a glance toward Chloe. "With the right partners, we can all win." The implication was clear. We could win together, if she played along. The chairman turned to her. "Ms. Thompson, as the controlling shareholder, your perspective is significant." "Do it," a small, vindictive voice inside her whispered. "Crush him. Make him feel as small as he made you feel." But Sebastian's question echoed louder. "What would you do if no one was watching?" She drew a breath. "Mr. Hartman," she began, "thank you for your presentation. I appreciate the work your team has put in." Polite, neutral. The board relaxed. "But I have some concerns." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Of course," he said smoothly. "I'd be happy to clarify any." "You've requested access to proprietary user data," she said. "Extensive access. In your risk assessment, you used the phrase acceptable exposure, or acceptable for whom?" A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "For the company, of course. Every partnership involves. Your proposal would give your firm broad discretion over how our data is analyzed and resold," she continued. "Your clauses about transparency are thin." A murmur rippled around the table. "Chloe," he said, smile tightening, "this is standard legal language." "Miss Thompson," she corrected gently. "And perhaps it's standard, but I have to live with more than my quarterly returns. I have to live with myself." She thought of the wallet on the floor, of the faces in Sebastian's file of names, people who had turned ethics into a negotiable line item. "You've already shown a willingness to blur ethical lines when there's money at stake," she said, matter of fact. Silence slammed into the room. Daniel's eyes flashed. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "Based on what?" "Based on your own search history," she thought, but didn't say. Cassandra's letter wasn't meant for public spectacle. Instead, she slid a folder across the table. "Based on this," she said, "your fund's investments in companies currently under investigation for data misuse. Your pattern of shorting firms just before scandal breaks, scandal your associates helped trigger." Amelia had done more than simply read Sebastian's list. She'd armed Chloe with receipts. One of the board members flipped through the documents, frowning. "Is this accurate?" he asked. Daniel's mask cracked. "This is taken wildly out of context," he snapped. "Any aggressive investor—" "I'm not interested in aggression," Chloe said quietly. "I'm interested in alignment. Innovis Prime's entire value proposition is built on trust. People trusting us with their data, their lives, their futures. Partnering with a firm known for squeezing profit out of every ethical grey area is bad math, regardless of the ROI. The silver-haired board member sat back. "I hadn't seen these reports," he muttered. Daniel's gaze snapped between them, a trapped animal scanning for an escape route. "You're making a mistake," he said to Chloe, low and urgent. "This is personal. You're letting our history cloud your judgment." She held his stare. "Our history clarified my judgment," she said. "It showed me exactly what you do with trust once you earn it." She turned to the board. "As controlling shareholder, I oppose this partnership," she said. "I urge you to vote accordingly." One by one, hands went up. Against, against, against. The motion failed. The power of it hit her like a slow wave, a life where her no actually stuck. Meeting adjourned, the board filed out, murmuring polite farewells. Daniel waited until the room was nearly empty before crossing to her. "You think this is over?" he hissed under his breath, the polished veneer stripped away. "You humiliated me, in front of my peers, in front of potential partners." "You humiliated yourself," she replied. "I just refused to reward it." His eyes glittered with something darker than hurt. Entitlement curdled into rage. "You were nothing," he said. "You were a librarian with a dog and a rent-controlled apartment. I built a life. I built a firm. Without me, you'd still be content," she said. "That's the word you're looking for." He laughed harshly. "You think these people will love you? They see a lottery ticket that somehow won itself. They're waiting for you to slip. And when you do, you'll wish you'd had someone like me in your corner." "I do have someone," she said calmly. "Myself." He leaned in, low and vicious. "You don't deserve this money. You don't know what to do with it." "Probably," she said, "but I know what not to do with it." For a moment they simply stared at each other. Two versions of success locked in a battle over what that word meant. "Stay away from my foundation," she said finally. "Stay away from my companies. And stay away from me. If you keep pushing, I will make public everything I know about how you operate. Not because I want revenge, but because the world deserves the truth." His lips curled. "You think you can fight me?" "No," she said. "I think I can outlast you." She walked away on legs that trembled once she was out of his sight. That night, headlines shifted. Billionaire heiress blocks ex-husband's firm in ethics-focused move. Talk show hosts debated whether she was being too sentimental or brilliantly principled. In her penthouse, Chloe sat on the floor with Barnaby and a stack of folders from the Sterling Foundation. Photos spilled out. Schools built in rural towns, clinics in places the world forgot. She could hear Daniel's voice in her head. "You don't know what to do with it." Maybe not, but she knew how to start. She picked up a pen and circled 3 projects that made her chest ache. One for libraries in underserved communities, one for grants to women starting over after divorce or financial abuse, one for scholarships in information science. "Let's see what quiet integrity with loud consequences looks like," she murmured. Somewhere downtown, Daniel stared at his own dwindling account balances, angry investors, and a fiancée's empty side of the closet. Karma didn't need her help to find him. All she had to do was get out of its way. The weeks that followed were a blur of recalibration. The world had decided who Chloe was. Now she had to decide who she wanted to be. She moved back and forth between the penthouse and her old Brooklyn apartment at first, afraid to let go of the life she'd painstakingly rebuilt after the divorce. The narrow hallway with its peeling paint, the chipped mug in her tiny kitchen, the indignant squeak of the elevator, these things felt more real than heated marble floors and silent elevators. "I feel like if I fully move out, I'm betraying her," she told Olivia one night, sitting cross-legged on the floor among cardboard boxes. "The her who survived?" Olivia asked gently. "The one who went to therapy and learned to make incredible lasagna for one." Chloe smiled. "Her. That her didn't do all that hard work, so you could spend the rest of your life apologizing for being okay, Olivia said. You're not betraying her by leveling up. You're honoring her by making sure no one ever treats her like a sedan again. Chloe laughed, tears pricking her eyes. I hate that the metaphor is kind of useful. Use it for yourself this time, Olivia said. You traded in guilt and survival mode for impact and choice. Feels like a fair deal. Slowly, the boxes emptied. Some things went to the penthouse, some to donation bins. Some stayed, anchoring the little apartment as a place she might someday turn into something more, a refuge maybe for other women starting over. Meanwhile, the Sterling Foundation transformed from an intimidating stack of reports into a living organism she could understand. She attended meetings, asked dumb questions, listened more than she spoke. She visited a community library in the Bronx that had received Sterling funding years earlier. She walked through shelves that smelled like her childhood, watched kids sprawl on the floor with comic books, noticed the way the librarian, tired but radiant, glowed when talking about new programming. You changed our lives, the woman told her. Chloe shook her head. Sebastian did. No, the librarian said. Whoever he chose to trust did. That's you now. At a shelter for women leaving abusive relationships, a social worker explained how a small grant had funded temporary housing and legal support. One woman, holding a toddler whose cheeks were still wet, squeezed Chloe's hand. I thought I'd have to choose between staying and homelessness, she whispered. Your foundation gave me another option. You don't know me, but you saved me. Chloe drove back to the city with that sentence echoing. You don't know me, but you saved me. For the first time, she let herself accept that maybe she could do more than just not mess up what Sebastian built. Maybe she could expand it. At home, she drafted a proposal with Olivia's help, a multi-year initiative called the Second Chapter Fund, grants, legal aid, and business support for women rebuilding after being discarded. It's on brand, Olivia said dryly. Karmic justice, but with paperwork. They presented it to the foundation board. There were questions, concerns, a few veiled hints that focusing on divorced women might be too niche. Chloe stood her ground. There are millions of us, she said simply. We are not niche. We are underfunded. The motion passed. Press coverage shifted again. From librarian to philanthropist. Billionaire heiress launches second chapter, fund for women rebuilding after divorce. Some of the comments were cruel. Of course she cares about divorce. She's a bitter ex. Others were supportive. One anonymous comment under a news article simply said, "Thank you." Signed, a sedan. She screenshot it and saved it. Daniel's shadow lingered at the edges of every headline. His firm bled clients after leaked reports about his ethical grey zones hit the financial press. Reports Chloe hadn't leaked, but hadn't felt compelled to shield him from either. He tried to call. She didn't pick up. He showed up outside a charity event once, shouting her name, eyes wild. Security gently but firmly escorted him away. I could file a restraining order, David said afterwards. Chloe watched Daniel being pushed back behind the velvet rope, shouting protests no one could hear over the music. Do it, she said quietly. Not because I'm afraid, because I'm done. The document was served the next day. Weeks turned into months. The world moved on to other scandals, other heiresses, other dramas. Chloe's name stopped trending daily. That was the way she liked it. On an unremarkable Tuesday in early spring, she got an email from Cassandra. I don't expect a response, it read. I just wanted you to know I've started my own consulting firm. Turns out there's a market for teaching women how to read financial contracts before they sign them, prenuptial and otherwise. I call it Bugatti Advisors. My friends think it's petty. I think it's hilarious. If you ever need a guest speaker for the Second Chapter Fund, you know where to find me. Chloe laughed out loud. Bugatti Advisors. she replied before she could overthink it. I love the name. Let's talk. The day Cassandra walked into the penthouse, no diamond on her finger now, hair pulled back, eyes clear, they shared a look that acknowledged the past without dwelling there. Nice place, Cassandra said, whistling softly. I see why he panicked. It's just walls and windows, Chloe replied. The real upgrade was learning how to say no. They sat at the long dining table, sketching out programs for workshops, support groups, financial literacy courses. Two women who had been turned into trophies by the same man, now quietly designing ways to make sure other women became players instead. Do you ever think about what would have happened if he'd never said that Bugatti line? Cassandra asked at one point. Sometimes, Chloe admitted. Then I remember that he was already that man before he said it. The line just made it obvious to everyone else. Fair, Cassandra smiled wryly. He really did do us a favor in a twisted way. By the time summer rolled around, the second chapter fund had its first cohort of grantees. Women stood on a stage in a modest community center, sharing dreams of bakeries, tutoring centers, tech startups. Chloe sat in the front row, heart full, Sebastian's letter folded in her purse like a talisman. After the event, as people drifted out, she lingered in the doorway, watching the sun set over a city that had once felt enormous and uncaring. She'd been the quiet ex-wife once, the forgettable cautionary tale. Now she was something else. Not a revenge fantasy, not a headline. A woman who'd stopped accepting other people's versions of her story and picked up the pen herself. In the end, Chloe's story wasn't about trading one man for a richer one or turning a cruel metaphor into a louder clapback. It was about something much quieter and far more dangerous to a world built on status and greed. She proved that the moment you decide you are enough without the money, the marriage, or the applause, that's when you become truly powerful. The fortune only amplified what was already inside her. Integrity, resilience, and the refusal to let anyone else hold the pen to her life. If you've ever been made to feel like the reliable sedan in someone else's story, remember Chloe, the woman whose ex-husband bragged he'd upgraded, until karma handed her the keys to an empire. If this tale of betrayal, clever revenge, and hard-earned redemption resonated with you, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more unforgettable drama stories.